Hey folks, Steve here with another Prussia's Glory video. This is going to be the Battle of Torgau. We're going to play the battle scenario. Here in this one, the last one I had tried playing the main scenario, and boy, I just really didn't do very well as the Prussians, having decided to do a frontal assault, which is very adverse to history given, trying to do a frontal assault probably would have been a bad idea. I didn't mean to do that. I had meant to sneak around this lake here, but even that went against the Prussians. So, kind of a bad situation. Fortunately, we can see how things work if you try different maneuvers with the main scenarios of this game. So, figured I'd cap off the final video on Prussia's Glory 1, the last playthrough video at least, and not necessarily the review, for this with just the Battle of Torgau. So re-racking and seeing just how things might have been different if we had been playing the historical situation. So the context here is that while uh, Frederick had columns kind of head north and present a threat to the Austrian front position, he had taken a number of columns with him out and around. And I was right in my assessment, having read some of the scenario notes that, yeah, they were picked up by some of the Austrians, and the Austrians knew they were coming. One way or another, it's bound to happen. It's, in fact, really hard to get all the way over to where you see these forces up here are now. Um, Without the Austrians activating. So in this case, the Austrians, however you choose to, uh, however you might choose to assume that it occurs, the Austrians are activated, and so the whole of the scenario is going to be really focused here. And again, tracing a line of communication at Torgau is important for the Austrians. They are stretched there. You can see from the woods to the outskirts of Torgau itself, and just even the Prussians heavily split here now. It's kind of interesting because the forces that are on the map are are only so strong ultimately. The Prussians, uh, are not terribly advantaged here. The only thing being, they can try to concentrate by attacking some point of the line and try to overwhelm it. And so there's a couple of tricky bits here. So you certainly have some cavalry, and you've got an infantry with cavalry force here. I'm sorry, no, this is all infantry. My bad. So an infantry force, a cavalry force, and what we may want to do is pull the cavalry over here and try to smash through, or face the cavalry here. A couple different options. And in the north, the Prussians have some cavalry kind of locked up in this town that we need to bring down. In fact, the maneuvers of the northern force need to kind of come out and around here a little bit. So there's a couple different ways we could go about it. Historically, what eventually happened is that the Prussians, after making failed attempts at storming the hill here that the Austrians are sitting on, came over here, found a way across the river, and sort of focused effort here on the tip of the Austrian position, and that eventually let the Prussians sort of chase the Austrians as they retreated towards Torgau. Um, so we could try to do that. That could be the historical event. The other thing we could try to do is simply move the Prussian forces down here and try to break a line here, block Torgau, and then just kind of leave the Austrians in rough shape if we can force these guys back. Now, I do have some setup options where the Austrians can place some of their artillery on any infantry unit. So I've put plenty of artillery over here, but I've also put artillery over here so that, there's not going to be an easy place for the Prussian cavalry to simply try to plow through here. They've really got to commit to something. With the Austrians kind of almost surrounded, it does mean that they have to be careful wherever the Prussian pincer lands. Could create a situation where you're forcing units to retreat in opposite directions. So some Austrians may retreat towards this map edge. Some Austrians may start retreating to the west. So the Austrians could get divided like that, which could pose a big problem because it'll be really hard for them to kind of get their units back in good order once they're retreating off in random directions. And again, we're close to the eastern map edge. We could be forcing units off quickly with some routes, some well executed routes. So we still have the rivers that could pose a problem and slow us down like they did in the main scenario that we played. Um, in the north, it's a little more open in terms of where the units are going to have contact through this clear terrain. But if we try to do some outflanking maneuvers, we are going to have to deal with some rivers slowing us down a little bit. So yeah, so this will be interesting. Now, in terms of the turns, there are some reinforcements of the Prussian artillery that will come in on the second turn of the scenario, but we actually start all the way at the 1400 turn, 2 p.m., and this scenario actually runs for 5 turns. So I think we ended up playing a very large number of turns when we played the main scenario, but a lot of it, we started having contact early and it just bled out from there. Here it's going to be, it's not a huge number of turns, so it does incentivize us to try to go hard and fast and deal as much damage as possible within reason to come out ahead on the victory point and morale comparison. I'm really not sure. It's going to be interesting to see, do we have enough time to deal enough morale damage to one side or the other to cause someone to demoralize? So we could end up with just maybe a marginal victory. But, historically, the battle was very, very, very bloody and a Pyrrhic victory for Frederick. So, yeah, anyway, enough intro. We'll get started here. We'll start with the Prussian turn. Depending on how effective the units are, we're either going to maybe try to spread out a little bit and get situated differently. We've got to pull some of those Prussian units down, including the red banner formation. I try to bring them further down south to be in a better position, and then kind of go from there. Maybe we smash right here. We just go and work our way down and create, just cut the Austrian army in half. That might be one thing to try to do. We'll see. Anyway, all right, guys, we'll get going here with the first turn of the scenario. Prussians going first. Okay, here we are now at the beginning of the 1500-hour turn. You can see, this was kind of a very careful advance, and now I'm even seeing I probably put these Prussian artillery out of position because they can't get a good fire on much yet. You can see I'm starting to head forward. The Austrian artillery is starting to chip away a little bit at the Prussians as they advance, so there's definitely a need now to try to get up in there and find a way to shift the balance. Again, it seems like a cavalry battle is going to be important. There was a significant chance that the Prussians were going to get some momentum cavalry attacks, but they failed their die roll for that, which left them a little susceptible to the Austrians. So both sides are starting to get some disordered units. We'll need to decide, just what we're going to do. I think what I may end up doing is trying to press with this artillery and just start moving forward and force either the Austrian cavalry away from the rifle fire of the cannon, or something. Again, because we may want to create that blocking maneuver of Torgau. Because there's only so many turns, trying to create that situation might not be so hard, and then we win on a victory point check. But it's still a tough thing, and the Austrians so far haven't moved a whole lot because they're waiting to kind of see where the hammer is going to drop. They don't want to necessarily leave their positions on the hills if they can help it, where they can really do some damage. So we'll see what happens here. I think the Austrians took a pause to try to fire on this stack from a distance away, and doing that has proved somewhat advantageous. So if they can soften up the Prussians, then they can come back in with some of their heavy cavalry with some shock bonus and maybe clear those guys out. And then that'll put more pressure on, while there's plenty of Prussian artillery here, their inability to really get a lot going, and they'll get surrounded potentially by various units and get whittled down. So still early yet, and not a whole lot of damage has been done. We'll see what happens next with the next turn. Okay, here we are at the beginning of what would be turn 3, the 1600-hour turn, with both sides taking some losses, but generally I think the Prussians are actually winning so far. They've managed to push back the Austrians here, though the artillery here is going to continue to pose a problem. They've been managing to take steps here and there off the Prussians, but the Prussians are hoping to simply break through and create a consolidated line on the other side of the Austrians, rather, cutting them off from Torgau and then routing any other units off the map. And that should be enough to win. You can see they've already got things in place where these guys are about to rout off, essentially. Not likely they can... I don't think there's any way they can save themselves now. And then even fighting around here have managed to kind of push the Austrians back. The main thing is just create this situation where if we can apply enough pressure, we close this off. And I think we're pretty close to being able to do that. And at least put them in a pretty bad situation. Because it's only so many turns, it's like every action kind of matters about where you want to focus effort. And I do think here very soon we should see a lot of the Austrians around here kind of get pushed back. You can see they're disordered. That kind of opens up the possibility for the Prussians to make the gains that they really need to make. Oops, that's spent already. So yeah, doing much better for the Prussians this turn as they put the pincer on. I definitely think, rather than trying to force a massive withdraw here, having a firmer try to dash and cut a line in between the army and Torgau's seems to maybe be working better. We're not causing a mass rout yet, but we are putting the noose around the Austrian army's neck, so to speak, and I think that may be a better path to victory, because if we make it so that the Austrians have to go on the attack, that's where the Prussian artillery will enjoy a better advantage than they already do in being able to move into Zox and punish the Austrians for trying to reestablish a supply line. Kind of interesting how that's going to work. But either way, I mean, it's a good position, and the Austrians can continue to apply the pressure, hopefully restore some of their disordered units, and fight away. So we'll see what happens here in the 1600-hour turn, which is technically turn 11, but turn 3 of the battle scenario. We'll see what happens next. All right. Things are coming down to the wire here. We're on the very beginning of what will be the 1700-hour turn. So the second to last turn is about to begin. And you can see we've managed to really put the crunch on the Austrians, but the Prussians are starting to get a little bit worn out. So in terms of morale, the combat successes have kept Prussian morale pretty high. It's just going to get to a potential point where they just don't have the steps to keep it going. The other thing that we have going on is that the Austrians almost demoralized, but they have succeeded in not demoralizing. But it's very likely over this next turn that it's going to happen, in large part because they've got some routing units, and we're probably going to eliminate some more units here, assuming a lot of these guys can get reordered or formed up on the Prussian rally phase. So there's sort of a sliding fight. So these guys are trying to reposition, trying to keep a path open to Torgau, and it is still open. We're starting to create screens to see if we can't, move these guys, get them in a position such that, they could potentially still make use of their artillery. The only problem is, if the Prussians tighten the noose, any Austrian stack with artillery that moves into a Zoc is going to have to move that artillery to the bottom of the stack. Once that artillery is at the bottom of the stack, the whole defensive shielding of the artillery to blast guys assaulting your position goes away. So we're even having a case where Austrians are having to retreat this way because they don't want to run into um, other units, and so I'm kind of adjudicating that yeah, they can kind of retreat to the west. Not that that does them any good ultimately, and kind of takes them out of the fight. So kind of expecting this next turn, either the Austrians are going to um, hold open the path to Torgau one way or another, or the Prussians are going to kind of finish hanging the noose around these guys a bit and create the sort of convex thing that I wanted to do in the last main campaign or main scenario video. This is a stray artillery, and I'm trying to remember where he's supposed to be. I may have made a mistake there. I'll try to fix it here shortly. It might be one that was totally eliminated and I forgot to put on the morale track. Anyway, yeah, so kind of coming in towards the end, I kind of see this likely being a Prussian victory, but we could see maybe the Prussians and some of these more stout infantry units maybe pushing the Prussians back enough that they can make something else happen, but we'll see. Okay, here we are with we're really at the beginning of the 1800 turn, the last turn of the game. And the Austrians have demoralized, and they really don't have a whole lot left on this side of the map, where the units are basically fallen off the map very easily or very nearly will. And we're going to close the gap basically here, where certainly the Austrians are going to suffer the 10 victory point penalty because they will really not have a what is it? Cannot trace a path free of Ezok to any Torgau hex, and I think we're gonna all we need to do is kind of arrange these units as a ring around Torgau, and then otherwise the Austrians would have to try to punch through the little barrier that we can set up for ourselves. There still might be some bloody fighting as the Austrians try to do something, but now that they're demoralized, all their morale ratings are worse. They suffer combat penalties. So, and at this point, the Austrians out to the west really have nowhere to go for retreating off the map. So it's sort of like, well, maybe we try to fight and beat back the Prussians and do a lot of damage, but I think the differential is just going to very much be in the Prussian favor. So probably seeing this as either a Prussian substantive victory or a Prussian decisive victory. So better than history, if only because we've managed to create the proper pincer that has cut the Austrians away from their supply train, away from Torgau, have separated their army, cut them in half. A whole bunch of guys had routed off the map over here, a lot of cavalry. So really putting them in bad shape, all things considered. And to their rear is a bunch of forest, which is not great to be stuck in that position. So this would be a very good victory for Frederick. I'm still going to play through the last turn and just sort of show the great aftermath after the rest of this all completes. But certainly a Prussian victory. So much better than my foolhardy attempt at a frontal assault in this game system in the main scenario. Still, I think that was a fun exercise for the main scenario, just to see that indeed frontal assaults can be very bad decisions in the game system, which is appropriate. All right, let's see the final state of things. Okay, here we are in the aftermath. So kind of a weird thing. The Austrians had piled up all the way down on the broken scale, and then, I kept stacking up dead units as they continued to die. And what I'm not sure about is, I guess when you do the morale check, like they did get some combat successes by killing some Prussians that allowed them to shift up, but not enough routed units that they went down to broken and automatically broke. So in some way, I'm wondering is like, can you avoid being broken with a stiff counterattack? And if that reason alone, that alone might be the reason why this is only a Prussian substantive victory, other than a decisive victory. But you can imagine if the Prussians could get one more action, they would probably rip apart, the Austrians. There were some concerted attacks down here. The Austrians kind of as a last go kind of moved forward to try to attack. And they didn't do as well as they could have. They managed to ping away some Prussians, that's for sure. Forced some Prussians away. Some weakened Prussian units died off. But given the army is demoralized, on the verge of being broken, and when we count up the victory points, I'm not going to do it because just eyeballing it, I'm like, yeah, I think that differential is at least 10, certainly. So we'll call this at least a Prussian substantive victory, and I could certainly find an argument to make it a decisive victory, if only because really the Austrian army is on the verge of just being broken, and depending on how you operate with the counters when checking morale, arguably they are broken. So I guess that maybe I can double check that here. Hmm. Yeah, it seems like you would have to knock them down to be -10, and then they don't have any combat successes. So I guess that makes some sense. There was some bitter fighting, that the Austrians didn't totally collapse, but you can see. I mean, we've got Torgau is occupied, surrounded by Zocs. There's no way, in my like whatever else we might have needed to do to like move another unit right here to make sure that the Zocs are tied down, we could do. We would have done whatever. None of those units can trace to get over there, um, because of the unit sitting right there. So like they're totally cut off from the rest of the army. They're fleeing into the woods. That feels more like a decisive victory in my mind, but however you want to look at it. Anyway, this was fun, guys. This was the last battle of Prussia's Glory 1 that I was going to do before we head to the review. That review and all of this does not cover Prussia's Glory 2, and I would like to get to Prussia's Glory 2. I may take a break from Prussia's Glory to do some more Nations in Arms, which I still have over here to be played. But this was a nice distraction for something just a little bit different. So we'll see a review video here in the days or weeks to come, and we'll keep playing some other stuff. So thanks for watching, guys. Hope you liked the video. Hope you've enjoyed the time with Prussia's Glory 1. We'll catch you later. Take care. Keep gaming.